Why is China building Africa's railways? Over the years, China has played a key role in enhancing Africa's transportation, providing the continent with a much-needed boost in its quest to achieve regional integration. The development of several railways by reputable Chinese businesses that today crisscross the continent may be the most notable aspect of the Chinese contribution. Why is China building Africa's railways? By the end of this video, you'll be able to answer that. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of our videos when we upload them. Consider wanting to go to every country in Europe, or China, Japan, India, or even some regions of the United States. You could take a train if you wanted to. However, Africa doesn't actually have a sizable train network, and that presents a challenge for the area of the world that is industrializing the quickest. A railway revolution is taking place in Africa to fill this critical infrastructure gap. China is making a significant contribution to its construction. Beyond being architectural feats, these enormous building projects pass through safari resorts and the East African desert. They represent enhanced community stability, economic potential, global connections, soft power, and a transforming power dynamic in the construction industry. You need to take a brief step back in order to fully comprehend why China is constructing railways in Africa. Although we may go back much further, let's begin with the Bandung Conference in 1955. Following Western colonization, leaders from 29 Asian and African nations assembled in the aim of working together. This global cooperation led to the Tazara Railway's opening in 1975. The railway provides the landlocked nation of Zambia a 1,860-kilometer link to Tanzania and a route to export its copper to the global market without traveling through regions dominated by white minorities. It was mostly sponsored and built by China. Since then, Chinese investment in Africa has increased significantly from one country to another, with approximately $75 million in 2003 to approximately $2.7 billion in 2019. Over 30% of Chinese investment in Africa now goes towards the building sector. China is currently the largest supplier of development funding in Africa. This act demonstrated by China can't be for philanthropic reasons. As we continue, you may want to know why China is doing this. No one is currently making investment in this railway connectivity as heavily as China is. China has rapidly developed a sizable high-speed rail network and is now transferring its know-how to Africa. The Kenyan Standard Gauge Railway and the Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway are two of its largest investments in East Africa. The landlocked Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa is 756 kilometers away from the port of Djibouti along the $4 billion Chinese Belt Line. After launching in 2018, it has become the mainstay of the Ethiopian National Railway network. The first of its kind in East Africa, the construction involved updating an outdated, dilapidated meter gauge railway to the Chinese electrified railway standard. The locomotives are made to resist temperature changes of up to 50 degrees Celsius during the day and chilly nights at elevations of up to 2,000 meters. Provided by the Chinese contractors, there is a promise of comfortable air-conditioned transportation given by the railway. In the past years, less than expected amount of people have traveled using this railway, and the service isn't always reliable. However, a major amount of the railway's long-term potential is represented by cargo handling. More than 90% of Ethiopia's international trade is centered in Djibouti. Additionally, the new route transports nearly 25% of all imports and exports from Ethiopia. Even still, the volume of cargo is still far from being at its peak. It comes as no surprise that the railway is struggling to turn a profit. A state-owned Chinese bank called Exim Bank provided loans that were used in financing 70% of the project. More than $70 million is required to actually operate the line. The aggregate revenue from travelers and cargo in 2019 was barely $40 million. The problem is that you certainly won't be able to make enough money to repay the loans if there aren't any cargo or passengers using the railway. In 2017, Kenya's Standard Gauge Railway opened for business. The 480-kilometer high-speed railway, which is anticipated to cost $3.8 billion, is Kenya's largest infrastructure project since winning independence in 1963. Construction, which was managed by China Road and Bridge Corporation, included building extensive bridges, deep mines, and extensive embankments in order to navigate the difficult ground along the route. As one might think, building a project of this size through Kenya's stunning natural environment has proven to be difficult balancing performance. 12 of the railway's portions that went through national parks were opposed by environmentalists because they believed it might threaten the animals. The designers incorporated 14 animal channels and raised pathway divisions. The area's economy and transportation have both been seen as a significant transformation since the completion of the railway. The passenger service has cut the trip time from Mombasa to Nairobi more than 10 hours to about 5 hours with a $10 economy ticket. 1.7 million people used the Kenyan railway in the second year of service. Additionally, the cargo service used Chinese-made locomotives to deliver 5 million tons of merchandise. China's strategy for infrastructure development appeals to African countries because it goes beyond just offering financial assistance. It also serves as a one-stop shop for all the necessities during the course of a project. Negotiating with China is simple. It is not necessary to balance or take into consideration the interests of different actors. But when it comes to money, things get really much more challenging. Kenya is having problems paying back the loan it received from China's Exim Bank, which provided 90% of the project's capital. Additionally, any significant renovations or simply replacement parts will need to be bought from China because both of these trains were built to Chinese specifications. More than only these railways, China has made major investments in overseas infrastructure. It is sponsoring and constructing numerous infrastructure projects around the world as part of its vast Belt and Road Initiative. Based on their own experience with development, the Chinese have a strong belief in the power of infrastructure and its ability to drive economic activity. Africa benefits from collaboration with partners who share this drive to build infrastructure. Nearly half of all engineering, procurement and construction contracts in Africa alone are believed to have been secured by China. These contracts, however, have generated some disagreement. The country has been accused of engaging in unfair labor practices, such as hiring foreign workers rather than local ones in Africa. According to several research, Chinese companies employ a large number of locals, yet Chinese individuals still dominate the top managerial positions. The local construction of the Ethiopian railway involved the employment of about 20,000 Ethiopians and 5,000 Djiboutians. In Africa, there is no homogeneous standard for railway building. Determining how to link outdated colonial-era tracks with more modern-day Chinese standard lines is an inspiring challenge. In conclusion, China has made extensive delicate investments in African infrastructure. But depending so heavily on one country for development funding is a risky investment. Most African countries rely on China for roads, ports, trains, and power plants, among other types of fundamental industrial infrastructure. Chinese bankers sort of stepped in and said, hey, we can do this, since African states had a mandatory financial war chest and Western lenders were reluctant to support big infrastructure projects. The Chinese opted and said they are able to supply the money as a loan, also provide building materials and workers with the necessary skills. You wonder what options Africa has. China has seen a sharp increase in revenue from building projects in Africa since the early 2000s. Even though it's not known how long the funding will flow, China's railways in Africa are establishing the foundation for a long-term engagement between the two regions. If this partnership remains in place, China's legacy in the railway industry might have a big effect far beyond its own boundaries. What do we know about Chinese lending in Africa, and how do the Chinese take back their money after lending it to the African countries in question? Let's quickly see how. The Chinese use the controversial resource-backed lending model, and how does this model work? The resource-backed lending model for financing infrastructure projects in Africa is a model in which the borrowing country commits future revenues to be earned from its natural resource exports to pay loans secured from Chinese creditors. This model still exists in countries like the DRC, Ghana, and Guinea. When the country is stable, this model works. It helps a high-risk borrowing country secure needed financing. It assures the creditor of repayment, since the export revenues are directly deposited in an escrow account, with no risk of embezzlement by corrupt actors in the borrowing country. And it allows for the speedy completion of roads, bridges, and other infrastructure projects. When the going gets tough and the country becomes unstable economically, especially in the event of a collapse of volatile commodity prices, as it so often happens, some borrowers then turn to the International Monetary Fund for emergency assistance. A fine but crucial point here is that the range of commodity price fluctuations is calculated in the resource-backed loan, and thus, the lender bears the risk of debt default if collateral is not sufficient. Therefore, an oil price crash, for example, does not necessarily mean the borrower will run into debt distress, unless other contingent factors come into play. Angola most prominently experienced the full range of highs and lows of resource-backed financing. In fact, this lending model was largely pioneered in this Central African country Angola when China became its lender of last resort. China thereby financed Angola's post-war reconstruction projects from 2004 onward, including a $3.5 billion Kilamba Kiaxi satellite town in the outskirts of Luanda. Angola ran into problems when commodity prices crashed in 2015 and necessitated the negotiation of International Monetary Fund stabilization assistance. Despite this rocky start, the financing model persists in other countries. So we will just have to trust our gut and go with it. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification button so you'll be notified each time we post a new video. We will see you in our next video.